Okay, we'll make a start. Thank you everyone for coming. This is the Education and Local Economy Scrutiny Commission, and I'm Cass. I'm Councillor Cassandra Brown, and I'm the chair of the commission. We're not a decision-making body. Actually, the commission's role is to make recommendations for consideration by the cabinet. So that's what we try to do. There are no planned fire alarm tests this evening. If you do hear a fire alarm, please leave by the nearest exit and make your way to the agreed assembly point, which is at St John's Churchyard off Druid Street. Council security staff outside will be able to direct you. There are public toilets located off the main reception area, and please switch off your mobile phone or put it to silent while you're here so we don't have any disturbances. If there's any members of the public here, you are welcome to film, record, photograph, or tweet the proceedings of the meeting, but please do be considerate towards other people in the room and don't disturb proceedings as you do so. And if you are filming the meeting, please don't film anyone in the audience. There is a copy of the protocol for reporting and filming on the council's website, should anybody wish to take a look at that. And if anyone wants to join the internet, it's Southwark free Wi-Fi and it doesn't need a password. This meeting will be live streamed on the Microsoft Teams platform via YouTube, and it will be on the council's YouTube channel by tomorrow. And for members here tonight, please do raise your hand if you wish to speak and wait until I've given you permission to speak before contributing. Please can I also remind members and officers to ensure that they keep the microphone close and speak directly into it, because it's often quite hard to hear online, and we have had previous issues with this in other meetings. And as always, please refrain from digressing onto other issues. Keep comments and questions concise and specific to the agenda being discussed. So according to my plan, we should be finished by 8:50 tonight. I think everyone on the commission knows I do like to finish on time, if not before. So if everyone can help me achieve that, that would be much appreciated. So, in terms of the agenda, first up, as always, we've got apologies, and I have apologies from Councillor Ivina von Bies. I didn't receive any other apologies, but I see we are missing a few people, so I don't know if anybody else has heard or we got an update for lateness. Okay, cool, fine. We are quorate, though, aren't we? Okay. I will. Okay, cool. So I'll ask the voting members and non-voting members present in the room to show their hand or respond verbally when their name is called out. So I've already said who I am. I'm Cassandra Brown. I'm the chair of the meeting. Councillor Rachel Bentley.
Present and vice chair.
Councillor Mohammed Dean. Councillor Margie Newens.
I am Councillor Morgan Jones.
Great. Councillor John Hartley is not here. Councillor Youssef Hussain.
Hi, here, present.
And voting co-opted members, Martin Bracknell.
Present.
Ali Callan. And Manik Hagbo. Don't think they are here. Okay. Cool, thank you. Agenda item 2 is the notification of any items of business which the chair deems urgent. I do not deem any items urgent. And item 3 is disclosure of interests and dispensations. So does any member here wish to confirm an interest or a dispensation in regards to the agenda tonight? Nope. Fabulous. Okay, so agenda item 4. The minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of July have been attached in the supplementary agenda number 2. So I'll take those as noted unless anyone has any contentions or anything to ask. Nope. Fabulous. Right. Agenda item 5. So this is really the first substantive agenda item of the night, and that is us looking at the commercial property portfolio. So tonight we've got Ben Davies from Blue Bermondsey and also Councillor John Batterson, the Cabinet Member for Climate Emergency Jobs and Business, and also Mark Grant, the Assistant Director of Property on Commercial Property Portfolio. So first we'll have Ben, if you'd like to come up to the front here and pop yourself in front of a mic. That would be great. Oh, Ben, if you want to come this way, that would be great. Thank you. And I find this works best if you spend around 5 to 10 max minutes on your overview, and then we'll invite Councillor Batterson and Mark to come up next, and then we'll go into questions. And just for the benefit of everyone here, we've really invited you because we want to get to grips with the management of commercial leases in Southwark, including rent, repairs, marketing, everything that comes with that relationship with Southwark Council, and also Southwark properties as well, and kind of debt recovery plans, all of that good stuff. So given you're here representing the Blue Bermondsey, we're keen to understand your experience and the experiences of businesses in that area. So over to you, Ben. Yeah, press it and speak close to it.
Hello, nice. Ben Davis. I run Blue Bermondsey Business Improvement District. There are 366 businesses within the bid area, and it's a bit of a range. So we've got obviously quite a few big businesses within the biscuit factory, which is irrelevant to this, but they've raised decent seed A rounds, so like 15 million, whatever plus. And then obviously we've got the retail businesses on the high street, which is predominantly where I think Southwark's the commercial landlord. So just brief background on me. I used to equally be a commercial landlord of 1,500 member businesses. So used to looking at it from both sides, and equally now run my own co-live business. And equally the bids open in an affordable workspace within the Blue, but that won't happen until early Q1 next year, but that's with Archco as well, so that's kind of separate. Having chatted with a lot of the businesses, a lot of the businesses come to the bid with queries and questions. A lot of them are small family businesses. It's their entire livelihood, and it completely depends on it. So, and equally, renting property probably isn't their background. So when they do rent a building, it's kind of like it's very new to them. They might not always get legal advice. So quite a few of them are now facing rent reviews, and I know that it's been flagged that a lot of these are hangovers from COVID, which was understandable. I know the council did a lot of good work in trying to help businesses get through that period of time. However, now those rent reviews are kicking into gear, and those of you who may not know this, when a rent review happens, all of that gets backdated until when it was meant to take place. If some of those were meant to take place during COVID, that means they're kind of 4 or nearly 5 years out of date. And when that then takes place, that business will then be due to find that entire difference. Legally, this is completely allowed. There's within legislation, and equally legal precedent says that there was some rent review that was like 9 years after when it was meant to take place, this industrial unit or something. This isn't Southwark, by the way. This is elsewhere. This was one of the legal precedents, and that just kind of like that's allowed. So it's more than just a Southwark problem. I think it's a national and legal problem as well. So yeah, there's quite a few businesses going through that right now. And then a lot of us come to, and having now read the briefing paper, some of it now makes sense. Lots of the businesses come to us with repairs that are very long outstanding. Lots of the units that this is associated to is equally they've got housing above it. So based on having now read this, I can see that some of this might sit with the housing department as much as it does with the commercial property team. So that also comes from my chair. And so Jack Shaw, who runs Blue One, is the chair of the bid, has been for a long time now, and knows everyone in the area. So when he talks about businesses' problems, that's because most of them pop in and see him. He finds it really frustrating that when local businesses report a problem in, and yet again, this probably dates back to the housing commercial property split, that they don't know who to go to, and equally there doesn't seem to be a method, in his opinion, in terms of following this up. So whether there's some type of open methodology to see all of the listed issues, so that we can understand dates of when these were logged, because without that, and equally, I'm here, and obviously I've heard a lot of let's call them the gripes of the local business owners that they feed into me, it's about that two-way dialogue to understand where things are at, because a lot of the time I think they just want to know where it's at in the process. So I think they have a relatively good understanding that not everything is a magic wand, but it's just that, I don't know, that opaqueness of not being able to understand when or why. Yeah, and then the empty units element, and to be honest, Mark's colleague Paul has got back to us on of those elements in terms of the units might be going through some type of legal process as people vacate, but in that interim period, we've got a lot of shop frontages with just the shutters down, and I think that has an impact. This is the other one for me is quite a difficult one because lots of the businesses are members of the bid, but equally, let's say they aren't all using the unit as it was intended, let's say, and it's kind of like how we get through that process to make sure that the ones that are meant to be consumer facing, front facing, are front facing, so that the area doesn't feel like this kind of like barricaded in with shutters down, because it really makes the area feel quite not as accommodating or welcoming as probably what it should. But yeah, those are just the bits and pieces that I can feed back in an open forum. But is that helpful?
Yeah, it's very helpful. Thank you. And thank you, Ben, for all the work that you do on the bid. I think might be the first time I've had the bid from my ward, South Bermondsey, come and speak, and I recognise a lot of the issues that you're talking about. And obviously, the bids across Southwick do great work, so thank you for the work that you do. I know Jack Shaw well also, and I've heard from him on some of these things. So yeah, it's great to hear you speak from across the business community in Bermondsey. You have got a couple more minutes if you'd like to say some more things.
The one thing I really have missed, and I think a lot of people miss it. So I was involved in the setting up of the very first business improvement districts in London. So back in 2004, 2005, when we were setting up the likes of Waterloo, Better Bankside, Heart of London Business Alliance, Paddington, I'm missing one somewhere. They're a very different beast, and most bids in London are very different to the one you've got in Bermondsey. So I think it's great credit. Sadly, I never got to meet him, but the work that Russell did to set up a bid in this area, massive, and equally its ability to engage with family-owned businesses that are super local to that area and have such vested interest in it. It requires a lot of love because it's such a different scale bid to the rest that I see around the UK. I don't think I've seen anything quite like it. So its vicinity to quite a deprived area is so key on how businesses work, and we term it corporate social responsibility, but it's more than that. And when it's you really see it when it's family-owned businesses who live locally and they're working with like local communities, local schools. Yeah, the bid itself is really fantastic, and so I don't want to underplay that at the same time. But in terms of the issues, yeah, I'd say it's repair. Yeah, again, they're all small businesses. So when you're taking up time doing admin as a very, very small business, it eats into everything. So when they log something, it's just the knowing. And then yeah, again, if there's a rent review or there's something financial taking place. So my own co-working businesses went bust in the pandemic. And I know how hard it feels. So if your business is in trouble or it's having to deal with something that's financially critical, the amount of impact that has on you as an individual looking back now, it's it's almost like entrepreneurs need a help group at that moment in time, because when you've set something up, it feels as though it's entirely you and it represents you. So when it's not going right, it feels bad, and therefore how you behave in that moment in time isn't always your best self, let's say. But it's totally centered on it being everything to you at the same time. So when you're dealing with really independent small businesses, it has such an impact on their health and well-being as individuals. If they can sometimes feel as though they're not being their best self or their fairest self, I've been in that situation, and I know that therefore that has an impact on how they might communicate. That helps.
Yeah, really interesting. I think from what you said, I'm hearing, think of the word burden that's placed on them from admin, from all these things that you've talked about, and how that weighs on the success of their business, but also their well-being as well, which is an interesting angle for us to look at it from. Thank you, Ben. The plan is to have Councillor Batterson and Mark come up now as well, so we'll hear from you, and then we'll move to questions for all of you, so we can think about this in the round, if that sounds good. Cool. No, you're very welcome to stay. And I believe we have a paper from you as well, which is great. A couple of pages in with some background information and various bits of context on the commercial property portfolio. So hopefully everyone's had a chance to read that, but I imagine you will give a summary and refer to that as you go. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to take the reports read, so I will assume that everyone's read it. But
we've all read it, don't worry.
Absolutely. But I will, of course, provide a bit of a summary. And I think what I might do, if it's okay, is address some of the points that Ben's raised throughout, and just echo the point you made towards the end, which is most of the bids that we have in or around Southwark have a big team with sustainability managers and people focusing on different themes. And in the blue Bermondsey bid, it is just Ben, and he does absolutely amazing work. And was it last month or August, we had a walkabout, met some of the businesses, and running a business, especially if you are a small business, is not easy at the moment. And I think coming out of COVID, some of those the costs going up, and business still coming to terms with that looks like, even though for most of us we've kind of moved on and adapted, businesses it certainly still has an impact. So let me just sort of talk about the headlines, so to speak. So our commercial property portfolio is a big asset to the council. It's one of the levers that we have in terms of generating revenue that can then be invested back into our key council services. And that's not the case for every part of the council, but this is a key asset for us, which we're then able to invest into things that we deliver. And obviously, over the past 14 years, council funding has been incredibly tight and hard. Looking at the news at the moment, we don't expect that to get easier. So we just need to be aware that this is an asset to us and an opportunity to kind of generate revenue that we can invest back into the council. The report talks a bit about the properties that we have, and a lot of them, as Ben touched on, are HRA assets. They are the units that are generally below housing, and then and about 40% of our income comes from those. About 60% comes from general fund properties, which are generally larger, and to generate income from the individual sites. There is certainly a challenge in terms of the types of repairs that you would see in a HRA unit, where there's somebody living above it, as opposed to a kind of a single site where there is nobody living above it, because the repairs for that site are generally, you get in and you can address the issue, if there's somebody living above it, obviously you need access to that residential property, which is generally not as straightforward as it would be for our general fund properties. Nevertheless, I hear what Ben was saying there in terms of some of the repairs that get reported, and then maybe not getting updates as maybe quickly as they would like. I think there's certainly something that myself and Mark have spoken about, and the team, about the relationship between the departments within the council to make sure that housing are aware and they are treating it with the priority that other residential properties should have, because again we know what impact it has on businesses and the individuals that run those businesses. In terms of where we're at the moment, we're currently halfway through a 3-year budget that we approved. That 3-year budget baked in quite significant increases to our commercial property revenue over that 3-year period. That was based on some sites coming into the commercial property portfolio, sites that have been developed or purchased and come in, where the council expected to see a revenue from those. It also included kind of rent reviews, which, as Ben said, some of those have not been conducted for a number of years, and for those, what business might have been paying 5, 10, or 15 years ago is different to what you'd be paying now. So the revenue increases that we agreed at council assembly was based on rent reviews and the fact that businesses will be paying more for their rent because the market value has increased in that time. So just to factor in that we have a budget that we're working to, which included rent reviews and commercial properties coming into the commercial property portfolio. And just, I suppose, to give a bit of a summary, the figures are in the report, but our annual income for the current financial year is 25.5 million. That's up from 18 million pre-COVID. So again, some of it is new assets coming into the portfolio. Others are the fact that we have not conducted those rent reviews for a number of years, and that the market rate for those units and that property is significantly higher than when they agreed their rent and their leases back when they did. I suppose because of the revenue targets that we have, when a unit does become available, we are looking for the kind of best value for that unit. But we're also obviously factoring in other things in terms of the kind of makeup of our high streets, what services might offer diversity, which might encourage more footfall. I think Bermondsey in the blue is a really great example, but it's quite a unique one as well in terms of how we're able to shape that area and the town centre, because we do own a considerable amount of commercial property in that area, which is not the case for our other town centres, where we own considerably less, in fact in some very little. So the blue is a good opportunity for us, and actually was it the last council assembly, the South Bermondsey Ward Councillors brought forward the motion which committed to look to making sure that the lettings policy was being delivered. And just 2 weeks ago we had a meeting with your ward colleague Councillor Pollock, members of the commercial property team, to kind of review that, make sure it's updated as well, because there's things that were not included back then which we want to factor in now. And once we get that finalised, absolutely share it with Ben and the BID and other local community group stakeholders, and of course other ward members as well. And that again will look at things like what is missing in the area that would encourage more footfall. What are some of the conversations that we can have with some of the units which were front facing and kind of open when they initially started their lease, but maybe aren't now, and they've maybe kind of changed the use of them? Where can we have those conversations? What are the kind of legal powers that we might have for kind of moving on some of those tenants potentially? But absolutely having a conversation to think about the diversity of the area. I'm probably going into a sort of slightly different topic there, really, in terms of town centres, but just to highlight that we're looking for the best value for in terms of the market rent. That's why we use commercial agents. who are very well placed in terms of marketing properties and also doing the visits with potential tenants as well, and that's proved very valuable for us as a council, but also as a team. I'll touch on voids very briefly because the report does include some data on that as well, and that actually our voids level at the moment is very low. It's less than 3%. I know Ben mentioned a couple of stalls and kind of units in and around the blue. There are a couple of those at the moment. Poundland being the previous Poundland being a very big one, which was not a council property. Nevertheless, we understand that when you have shutters down and that the shops aren't opening, that has a significant impact on the local business community and the residential community as well. So as a council, our role is to do all we can, obviously, to fill those empty units as quickly as we can with the right tenants and for the best market rate that we get. I'll 2 minutes and then I'll maybe hand over to Mark. Just I suppose to highlight that a number of our commercial property at the moment are being let by voluntary and community organisations, and who when we agreed those leases were well placed and could afford the leases that they had. Obviously things do change over time, and we also what we want to do is think about how we can utilise our commercial property portfolio to support the BCS sector where we can. So we are going to be bringing forward a BCS offer as part of our broader BCS strategy, thinking about what financial support we might be able to provide organisations in that space. And we've spoken to Community Southwark, and they're aware of our plans, and we'll absolutely be consulting with them on that. We brought our affordable workspace plan forward, strategy forward earlier on this year. So that's thinking about how we can use some of the income from commercial property applications that come through the planning process. Think about how we can have affordable workspace hubs in different parts of the borough. And then just sort of finally, because I think it's a really important topic when we talk about commercial income, is that we do have more debt now than we had 5 or 6 years ago. Some of that is because obviously during COVID, enforcement powers were limited. We weren't allowed to chase for debt that was owed to us. We also know that some of them businesses struggled obviously through that period of time. Others have set up payment plans. There's quite a lot going on in that area, but we do have too much debt at the moment, and we also need to be aware that chasing debt, in some cases we can set up plans. In others, we do need to look at legal option, and that does involve enforcement action against businesses that are operating in the borough. And I appreciate that is not always an easy conversation for us to have as a council, because that is money that is owed based on agreements that they made with us and that we made with them. Equally, that debt level is now at a position which is higher than it should be. There are things in there that Mark has included in the report in terms of quite a lot of debt holding with like one account, which we're confident we'll find a resolution to soon. Others, we're going to be working on payment plans. But an effective way of getting debt that is owed to you is looking at the legal route, and it's just being wary that is not that's a sensitive issue and not one you need to manage carefully. I'll leave it there. I can bring in
Thank you. Yes, and timing wise, I know you were last, so it's a bit unfair, but 2 to 3 minutes if you can. We'll get straight into questions. So
not a problem at all. I think we do recognise the problems that, especially under housing with water leaks, it's a real problem trying to get that maintained and so forth, and it's something that has to get better and has to be addressed, because at the end of the day we end up giving the tenants rent-free periods, their insurance claims, but all of that has a knock-on effect for the businesses and for ourselves. So that's something that's really important. Where we can get access, we'll get our own contractors in straight away, and we can do those things. One of the points that they made about rent reviews, we're not seeking actually on a lot of the rent reviews that backdate it to the date that it could be backdated to. We are looking at each individual businesses, looking at perhaps their arrears positions, what they've got, and actually coming to something that's a practical arrangement between both parties, recognising that the rents are going up, but also there's no point actually giving them a huge further debt pile to pay off that they're struggling already. So there is pragmatic, and we'll look at each tenant as in their individual circumstances and the strength of their covenants and so forth. And I think with a large chunk of our portfolio, we have to recognise that they are small businesses. There is complex law, and the wording of that law sometimes can be quite arcane and quite difficult for in a sort of a plain English way for people to understand, and it can frighten people and be off-putting. So I think we need to sort of help people on that path a little more, rather than perhaps being systematic. I think probably answer your questions.
Yes, thank you. So you were very quick, so that's great. Okay, well, it's been great to hear all of these perspectives, and I'm keen that we dig into some of what you've said. I have already had a hand up from Councillor Newens, so I'll hand over to you and let me know if you want to ask anything.
Thank you very much. In actual fact, during the course of your fantastic presentations, thank you very much. I think more or less the points I wanted to ask was about to what degree we can curate our high streets, which is very much a function of the percentage of the properties on any given high street that we own. You said that in the blue that's very high, but it would be useful to have a picture of what is it like elsewhere, if you could give a little bit more detail on that. I was also going to ask about the staged, like obviously the legal position where we can backdate. So it's good to hear that you're saying that we're not sort of, going in and we are acting sensitively sort of to the needs of the business in terms of how we raise rents and to what degree. I think that actually feeds into one of the to another point which I was also going to ask you about. You'll be aware of the situation. There was a property in my ward, in Village Road, which we apparently owned, and no one knew anything about it. It was a bank. It's now been sold. But that kind of did create the impression that perhaps we were not so good at sort of knowing our portfolio as well as we should have done, and therefore perhaps also in monitoring the timing of approaching businesses with rent reviews and that sort of thing. And I think perhaps that's the principal issue here. It's dealing with the businesses to make sure that the rent reviews are carried out sensitively, but also from our perspective they have to be timely. So can you sort of talk a little bit about reassurances about how we are actually now sort of doing things as they should be done in order that ultimately, as you say, we need to maximize revenue. Thank you.
And I did see Ben raise his hand, so if you'd like to come in with the business perspective on anything Margie said, you're very welcome to.
Just to add to it slightly, and I'm glad that the council are not in all circumstances trying to backdate completely, but every single business in the blue that's mentioned this to me is in the scenario where they're being asked to backdate the full amount. So it's useful to hear that it's not always the case, but I'm roughly aware of what the percentage is, but I'll let to them the high street portfolio percentage.
I can come in. I think, Maggie, your question was around like what it's like elsewhere. So I can maybe maybe ask March to talk a bit about the percentages in but maybe just to give a bit of an example about elsewhere. I mean, a couple of years back we had a very live example in Walworth where the post office was closing because it was in a private property, and there was a big kind of community response to that because of the impact it would have, particularly on elderly residents who rely on some of the services at the post office. And the new post office is sort of slightly down the Walworth Road, but it's in a council commercial property. So it's like I think a very good example of something where we were able to use our portfolio to address a very pressing need that the community felt was important to them. and maintain a service that is important to some of our most vulnerable residents. I think there's a point about Dulwich Village, so understanding our portfolio again. I might just get Mark to talk a little bit about. I know we've got different members of the team looking after different areas within the borough, and there's definitely something around. We are definitely getting to a point now where we're conducting those rent reviews earlier than we previously. There was quite a big backlog following COVID, and again, working through that has not been a quick process. But I think we are now in a position where we are carrying out those rent reviews a lot earlier in relation to the due date. But just bring Mark.
I think you mean the former Lloyds Bank on Lordship Lane. Yeah. So that was property that had been vacant for a considerable period of time. It wasn't. There was a view that we didn't want to sell things, and so therefore there have been no disposals for a great period of time. Over the last 18 months, as I joined, we've actually now done a significant amount of disposals, roll that through, that are appropriate to actually viable to bring economic use for ourselves. I think that was the example there. I think also we've got 52 units in the surrounding area. That is incredibly rare in our portfolio in high streets. So it does give us a really good opportunity to do something and place make in there. Our impact is very diminished elsewhere because whilst 60% of our income is general fund, it's a few big assets in terms of income. If you look at the numbers, it's under 300 in the general fund, reducing that 60%, and it's near 900 HRA. So by the very nature, a lot of those are small retail units underneath those units. And I think it is very also important to understand there are slightly different financial rules for the HRA than there are for the general fund. Therefore, the HRA, you have to try and achieve market value. Just by that, the general fund, you can actually potentially have a little wriggle room where you can have social value as well as financial value, and you're balancing that. So that is a challenge that we need to think of. But also we need to work with our businesses, get through the backlog of landlord and tenant work, not being able to chase debt, actually understand that we don't want voids, we don't want to put people in business. It's not good business for us because you have something empty for 6 months, you're paying an agent fee, you've got void costs. But it's actually working with to see where we can.
Great. I've got Councillor Bentley next.
Thank you. And yeah, it's been really interesting and kind of reflecting on some of the cases I've seen, certainly in my ward, but also kind of in the local area. I think I have several questions, but I'll try and make them as clear and concise as possible. I think one of the things that I've heard coming out of COVID, and I think you've all touched on it tonight, that it's been a really difficult time for businesses, Brexit, COVID, inflation, everything that's going on now, NIC increases, just everything has been really, really tough. I think what I have heard from many businesses is that it's been really hard to get payment plans in place where there are rent arrears. And then when they have eventually heard back, there has been, in cases, a rush to court, which obviously then creates a cost to the council. So kind of trying to understand, have those backlogs now been cleared? Is that doing better? You've talked, I'm really glad you raised the issue of the HRA versus commercial, because I think some of those points around leaks from above, the ones that I'm aware of, and I know of a business in Rotherhithe that's just gone out of business actually. And one of the things they've said is about a leak from above. So I guess the question is, how can that be dealt with better? Mark, you mentioned kind of getting your contractors in. So kind of thinking about the practical answers here. And then I think the last question, which is probably more a philosophical one, is, and I think Councillor Batterson, you kind of hinted at it, that the council wears two hats here, right? The council wants to have thriving high streets and, public realm, that is attractive. But you are also a commercial landlord and looking to make money for the council more generally. But that sometimes put you into conflict and competition with private commercial landlords. And so I guess the question is, thinking about what you just said, Mark, about disposals, should the council be in the business of commercial lets? Is that the right job for it? So there's three questions there. Hopefully you got them all, because my memory is very short. Thank you.
So first, I think there's the legal option is the last option that we would take. So it might be helpful to understand the businesses that felt there was a sort of rush to court was, I think, the you use, because and it probably feeds back to the last point in terms of, you know, the legal option costs money for us as well. So that is not the most cost effective way of getting arrears that is owed to us. Obviously, in some cases, we have to do that because the businesses might not be paying. But maybe I'll get Mark to touch on maybe the process that we go through in terms of how we reach that point. There is definitely a conversation that we can and will have with housing colleagues. I think that bit around the process is really important to make sure that these are being dealt with as quick as they can. Properties in the HRA are an asset for the HRA because they bring in income, and we know everything that's happening with the HRA recovery plan. Equally, if it's an asset in the HRA, then the housing are responsible for carrying out the repair as well, and so that is can also create a bit of a strain on the HRA. So there's obviously conversations that have there. One thing that I think is kind of related to this, but spoken a bit about when businesses need or want to raise something, where do they go? What is all the information that they can have, given that they are not experts in kind of asset management? And I know we've looked at examples of information packs for tenants where all the information that they need is in one place. I think we can produce that relatively easily, and we've spoken about doing that. So every tenant, when they come in, they know who to report an issue to. They know who the local person is within the commercial property team. They've got all the contacts, and they're not finding it hard to contact the council. So that's also something that we've committed to. Councillor Bentley, I think just the final point around the sort of relationship that we have as a landlord as well as a council. I come back to the point that I made at the start. We've got a commercial property portfolio, which is a big asset to the council, in my opinion. It allows us to do things like shape our high streets in Bermondsey. It allows us to look at how we can better support the voluntary and community sector. It is also a revenue generator for the council. So my strong opinion, hearing what Mark said about the void units, where it would require a significant investment to bring it back into use. That is the basis where we make a decision about whether we dispose and sell off any of our voids. But my opinion, based on those three things, in terms of shaping our high streets and our areas, being able to respond to community interests and needs in terms of what happened on the Walworth Road, being able to better support the BCS sector, and it being a revenue generator, my opinion is that makes being a commercial landlord a positive thing.
Just a sort of a couple of points as well. I think a lot of the retail units, for example, physically sit underneath housing assets, so therefore separating them would be not a sensible, I don't think, asset management decision. The previous authority I worked in before I came here did that many years ago, and it's made it almost impossible to create new homes on those, because they'd sold off on a 999-year leases with commercial assets. So you have to buy them back in, and adds another cost of liability and so forth. So I think there is a danger about that. Also, I think the other assets that we hold for investments often have a duality of purpose. It's not purely about income stream. It's about future opportunities for new housing development, for affordable homes, and sort of redevelopment and improvement of areas as well. So they're not necessarily strictly held as what I would call a grade A commercial blue chip pension fund style investment. It's more sort of an additional income stream that comes through for a future program. That's quite important to see. So we're not a balanced fund. We're not a trading fund. We're not a pension fund or a property company, and that's very much recognised in how we operate.
If I can just come back in, I think thinking about, we've had bids in before. Russell, I remember, came and spoke to us kind of 3 years ago. And I remember him saying, look, I just kind of want the council to get out the way you know, I want you to enable. And it feels like some of these things just take too long, it's too slow, and it's not agile enough. And I think Ben used the word opaque. And it's like, how do we make that more agile and responsive? Because as you say, if you've got a local independent business and you're hanging by a thread financially because of everything else that's going on, and you've got a leak coming through that's preventing you from getting on with your business, that needs to be sorted. It needs to be sorted quickly. So how do we do that, I guess?
Well, as I say, the challenge is a huge challenge of ones which are underneath flats, because we simply can't get my team cannot get a contractor just to go and knock on a door or force access into someone's home. So we have to go through our housing colleagues to do that, and that has to improve, because water coming through, we've all had water leaks in our homes and businesses and so forth. The damage it can do so quickly is enormous, and that has to be addressed very quickly. That's that communication with our colleagues and ensuring that they can act upon it swiftly. I think is very key, and it's very frustrating for all parties. Team as well as housing, as well as the individuals and businesses that are suffering. So that's really important. Other assets where we have those there ability to repair, we can repair very quickly, and we do. But generally left few and far between, because those assets often the tenants have full repairing and insuring leases. So actually they're responsible for the repairs and maintenance of that. So they have their own control and destiny. I think what we've got at the Blue is a very interesting opportunity, because we have a sort of a whole group of properties all together to help shape that. Our other assets with other bids will be, we have an odd property here and an odd property there, and therefore we're probably very much a bit player, and it's very, very difficult in the marketplace because of the nature of property ownership in this country, of individual people and doing that. If you have landlords that have a cohesive landholding, they can develop a better plan. The individual ones becomes a lot more challenging.
Thanks. Ben, is there anything you'd like to add on that? And then we'll come to our last question on this item, which is from Councillor Hussain.
I just think I'm going to pop into work tomorrow, and the first thing Jack is going to say is, like, John, you're both right on the mark, but it's kind of like, it's when will we get this pack of information that the businesses can then use? And it's kind of like, if Russell was here banging away, or whatever he did, I've spoken to so many people, he's such a great people have got such good stories of it. But if he was here and now I'm here saying the same thing, I just, like, it's kind of like, yeah. And it is, if businesses have gone bust and gone through that process and come out the other side, I just hope, yeah.
Yes, and I remember Russell coming to this commission, I think when I was sat on it as a member 3 years ago. So it's a very important point, and one we should take into consideration as we make recommendations back to the council. Okay, so Councillor Hussain, and then if we can, I will squeeze in another question, but I'm not promising it.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions, right? So in terms of the rent reviews, what's the criteria for the rent review, and how do you kind of arrive at the kind of market value figure, as it were? And then the second question is, obviously we know that the properties that are above each of these kind of commercial properties, is there any way of us kind of communicating to the tenants of those particular properties that it's kind of really kind of imperative that we're able to access the property if anything happens? And what's the communication between the Southwark Council and the respective residents that live above these properties? Is there something that we could do, or is something that you have done in terms of that, making that kind of like a priority, that in terms of that access?
So as we say, it's the increased communication with our housing colleagues to make sure that they understand the imperative nature of getting access as quickly as possible to carry out repairs. Because the longer it goes on, the worse the damage is, the lack of good, the more goodwill gets eroded and so forth. So that's the thing, being able to bang that drum and get the reaction. You also asked about rent reviews and so forth. Effectively, it all depends on the term of the lease. Lease says about that. But if, for example, if you have a 15-year lease, you might have 5-year rent reviews. Those rent reviews would be due on the date of the 5th anniversary of the term of the lease. And in the lease, there's the rules, regulations about how that rent would be reassessed. in short, it's basically what is the open market value of the premises at the date of the rent, in general terms. Some leases have indexation, where it's kept to sort of CPI or RPI, some of them, and sometimes they have a cap and collar as well to reflect that. The law is changing. I think the second reading has gone through the House of Commons. I'm not sure it's gone further than that yet. And the proposal is that you wouldn't just have upward rent reviews only, which most of them are. That's historically been the way, to be upward and downward. Interesting challenges. You wouldn't be able to have CPI linked cap and collar increases. So you'd have to have fixed increases potentially. So there's some challenges heading in the direction, but that will give some tenants actually would benefit potentially from an indexation. So with the council, others, the rents can fluctuate so greatly. You're taking market forces. So it's all about sort of, again, a balance. Because obviously we want to have the best income that we can generate. And so forth, but we also want to have sustainable businesses because we don't want them going bust every 6 months and we have to then find a new tenant and do that. So it's actually about having that appropriate balance, not ultimately being too greedy.
Okay, last question. It's got to be concise and very quick responses from the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about tenant selection. When selecting tenants, our priority is the maximization of income. But we must also consider other factors such as tenant mix, protection of the neighborhood character, and local impacts. So my question to you is, how do you ensure that the maximization of income is balanced against tenant mix, the protection of the neighborhood character, and the local impacts? We don't want local businesses to be chopped out.
So one of the reasons why we prefer to use a letting agent to assist us with the marketing of any vacant unit that does come up. And as I say, we have probably about 1.4% voids at the moment with things that are actually under offer. There's 17 voids, 8 of them are under offer. So in a portfolio of 1,100 properties, that's quite good. And by using an agent, one, they're in tune with the marketplace about what's happening in the marketplace. The letting and marketing process will actually then go to best bids, and people will put their proposals for a variety of uses, obviously reflecting what the planning use is for that particular unit. That way, we're very transparent because we're actually giving everybody a fair crack of the whip to put their proposal in. We can look at that, and it's not just a blend of getting the highest rent. It's, is the business sustainable? Have they got a business plan? Do they have a track record? Are they a startup? Because that's just because they're established doesn't mean that the startup should be sort of looked at differently. And also, what are the other businesses within our parades there? So there's a balance. We also have certain uses that we won't simply tolerate and allow, and so forth. So I think it's having a blend of financial, economic, and also then the social value. If something's missing, like we've got one recently where we're going to let it to a pharmacy, which wasn't the highest rent, but there's no pharmacy within the area. And so I think it's those choices.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, we're coming to the end of this agenda item, so thank you very much. Just a few things I wanted to summarise based on what stood out to me. So certainly the relationship between housing and commercial, I think that comes up in every aspect of the council. I think we're all aware of the waste and housing collaboration that's happening around pilots so that those departments can work together. I certainly think a similar kind of pilot should probably happen there. Something else that stood out is actually that the business experience is perhaps quite different to the council's view of how these things are being managed, particularly around the backlogs and those individual cases. And I think that disconnect is really worth paying attention to. Whether the council can, I dread to say, do a feedback survey, but just some way of really getting to grips with the real experience and not to invalidate Ben's voice, because that was the point in you coming tonight, to tell us that. And I think often we can be guilty of then doing more research just to hear again what we've been told. So I'm mindful of that. Making it easier for businesses to navigate the council, I think that's a key recommendation we can look at fleshing out. And council being too slow. We hear that a lot, don't we? So yeah, I think there's some key themes that we can pick out there in our recommendations. That's been really helpful. And lastly, just wanted to also acknowledge Russell and the great work that he did before the brilliant work Ben is doing the ex-chair of the Bermondsey Bid, who passed away last year. So very grateful to him and the legacy he left within Bermondsey. Thank you very much, guys. No problem. Thanks. Appreciate it. There were 4. Okay, right. So we're now on to agenda item 6, which is youth services and positive futures for the Young People Fund. So I am delighted to invite Councillor Portia Mwanganje up to the panel, the Cabinet Member for Leisure, Parks and Young People, and also Tony Ange. I hope I pronounced your name right, but please correct me when you're up here. If not, the Director of Leisure, and Eva Gomez, the Head of Culture on Youth Services and Positive Futures for Young People Fund. If you'd all like to come up, that would be fabulous. And like before, I'll give you 10 or so minutes, and then we'd really love to spend most of the time on questions, if that's okay. If I miss someone. And I'm sorry, because I've clearly missed somebody, because there's 4 of you. So please do introduce yourselves as you go.
So I actually don't know, because my officers were supposed to come in and answer any strategic questions you had. I don't mind doing the overview of basic services that we have and what the Positive Futures Fund is, and then we can go them about the detail. I mean, I can go through the detail.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, I don't mind. It's probably worth acknowledging that we do have a report in the supplementary agenda, so we'll take that as read. I'm very happy, Portia, for you to give a short overview. Mindful that there's 4 of you and you haven't got long, so start and then pass on as soon as you can. I think it's probably best so that we can get lots of questions in for you.
So in terms of the youth services that we offer here at Southwick, so we have an in-house service and we also have a commissioned youth service. So our in-house service consists of all of our youth centres in the middle of the borough, north of the borough, and so middle and north of the borough, and then we've got adventure playgrounds, which are again in the middle of the borough, and also in the south. So we've got DTC in the south. No, we've got the Kennel Adventure Playground in the south of the borough, which also offers up youth programs to young people down the south borough. With our youth commissioned services, we have the Positive Futures Fund that we give out to our voluntary community sector. That is around 1.2 million every 2 years that is given out. And that spans between anything to do with all positive activities, anything to do with culture. Some of them are sport, most of them are to support the functioning of the youth organisations within the borough. And then we also have a Southwick Youth Parliament, which is our representative branch of the young people, which runs every 2 years. We've come up to the end of the 2 years now. They had their graduation last year, and there were over 50. There were 50 young people who have been engaged for the last 2 years, which I have to say is one of the best things that this team has been able to achieve. Because in the first year when we got elected in 2022, we had a cohort of, I think it was like 40 something young children, but for circumstances of their own, some of them kept dropping off, and we had about maybe 6 people that graduated. But this last 2 years, the team has put in a considerable amount of work engaging these young people. So they basically have decision-making powers when it comes to the Positive Futures Fund. They sit on a panel. They tell us where they want the money to go. They also have done work with planning, not planning applications, but planning policy, how our public realm is structured out, and then also how they want to move around the borough. So they've worked on Safer Southwark initiatives, they've worked on our Streets of People work, as well as just general anything to do with young people, also with jobs and skills and stuff. We also have the One Hub as well, which is the online platform where young people, parents and youth organisations can go on there. Over the last year, we have changed around how that works, because we realise that young people actually don't really go on there too much, but what it has been is a conduit for youth organisations and parents to actually know what's going on with their with the youth services here in the borough, and it's proved to be very successful for these youth organisations because they know who they can work with within their area. There's a very handy map that shows where all the provision is. So if anyone wants to know what kind of youth provision we have, if you go onto that website, it will basically give you a snapshot of all of the provision we've got in the borough. Conclusively, we have a very, very good offer. And it's one of the best in-house offers that I believe this side of England has got, because a lot of youth services have been decimated, but Southwark has been able to keep these organisations going and these youth centres going and keep these young people engaged. But we are trying to do better on this because we've realised that the cohort of young people that we have now are not the same cohort that we had when we actually brought in these services, and we're developing that. Thankfully, we have some money coming in from government, from the Youth Transformation Programme, which has given us £500,000 that is going to be spent in-house, but also on initiatives that are going to engage our voluntary youth organisations as well as young people. So we will be bringing young people into, for example, I'll let them go into the detail if I haven't already. We'll be having other youth-led programmes. At the moment, as it stands, the Southwark Youth Parliament and the Young Advisors are the go-betweens between us and the young people, but we want to expand that because we know not everybody is going to come to the youth parliament. Not everyone wants to be a young politician. Some people just want to get involved in their community without it being something that they want a career in the future, but we'll also give them other avenues to go into other things in the future. So we will be seeing how to do that. So essentially what the Youth Transformation Programme is seeking to do is to improve and continue to develop our youth offer with the market that we have now when it comes to youth services. Young people are right now they're engaging in completely different things. Sometimes they might not want to be in a youth centre. They might want to be in a podcasting centre. They might want to be in our parks with Burgess Sports Centre has been incredibly popular since we opened it up. There's a lot of different ways that we can engage with young people, and we've been told how they want to do that through the Positive Futures Fund because we create that data, but we want to make sure that we are actually we're doing the work that they have asked us to do. So this is going to give us the capacity to do that. And most importantly, we will be working with our voluntary community sector organisations to do that. We want to make sure that we are equipping them with the right data, with the right strategic information nationally so that they are able to get better ways of funding, be more experienced to get funding so that they can take care of our young people. We can't do it alone as a council, so we need them to help us.
Lovely. Thank you. That was great. Okay, who's next?
So I'll go next, but I don't think there's too much to add to that. It was, what can I say? Just the one thing I will say, Councilman Grandjo mentioned the DCMS Pathfinder and it's nearly £500,000. So it's a good amount of money, and we are one of only 2 in London who have managed to fill that funding. Probably the other thing to say is it's a very, very fast turnaround. So we got told about a week ago, and we've got to deliver that £500,000 by next August. So it's no mean feast. I think it was a good problem to have, but it definitely will be a challenge. So we're going to have to keep on running. But that will help us feed into all that Councilman Grandjo mentioned, particularly the Positive Futures next round. So we are really excited about that, albeit a little bit daunted. I probably didn't introduce myself. I'm Tony Ainge, Director of Leisure. And perhaps if we just introduce ourselves as officers, and then we can take the detail, because I don't think I have it.
Yeah, please. Sounds great.
Okay.
Again, my name is Eva Gomez, pronounced like forever and ever. I'm the head of culture, and youth and rent to play services is one of the services I've got the privilege of overseeing, and expertly led by Justine to my right.
Hi everyone, I'm Justine Wilson-Dark and I'm the Youth and Play Service Manager.
Thank you, Justine. You were the one on my list, so I'm sorry I didn't introduce you at the start, but it's great to have you and all of you. I know Portia gave a comprehensive overview of all of the different services, and Tony, you've added on. Is there anything else any of you, Eva, Justine, or anyone would like to add that's interesting detail for us to perhaps question around?
I think they've covered it quite extensively, but comprehensively. So I don't know, Justine, if you've got anything to add now. We're happy to go to questions.
Okay. I see Councillor Mwanganje has her hand up, so I'll let her come in.
I did miss something off, guys. Just when you thought that we couldn't do anymore. We actually have a small grants fund money that is given directly to young people. So an example of that is young people who are in sports who can't afford football boots, who can't afford certain kit, young girls who are increasingly interested in fashion and beauty. They're able to apply for this grant and basically use that money for basically whatever they wish to do. Which I think is quite a handy thing to do. It's great that we give money from the Positive Futures Fund, but giving the young people that freedom of however they want to be using that money, we also do track this as well. So we make sure that they are supported in getting the money and also making sure that they get what they need where they need to get it. So it's not that we just give them the money and they go off, but we try to make sure from the beginning to the end they're supported in that way. And I think that's a very fantastic thing that we do.
Yeah, I love that. That's so great. Eva.
Sorry, just as I said, I didn't have anything. We also have been rolling out a program of capital investment. So most recently, we've refurbished the gym at the Damilola Taylor Centre with all new state-of-the-art equipment that the young people are really excited about. We've also, last couple of years, we put new turf in the football pitch at the Damilola Taylor Centre. We're in the process of creating a music production space at the New Ventures Youth Centre, and we also have a very exciting, very comprehensive refurbishment programme about to start at Brandon that will make it fully accessible and totally redesign the inside again, all being shaped by what the young people have told us they want to see. We've also done our capital investment works in the adventure playgrounds quite extensively. Ellen Brown more recently, where it went from having a handful of children there to having queues and, sometimes not being able to accommodate everyone who wants to be there. So that's been another really exciting and positive stream of work that the team have been delivering.
Awesome. And yeah, another shout out for South Bermondsey Ward achievement. The Ellen Brown Centre and the playground there has just been amazing. So yeah, that's great. Yes, Portia.
Something I missed out in the overview that I was talking about is the work that we do with young people who have neurodivergent needs and also our LGBTQ plus young people. There is actually ring fence funding within the Positive Futures Fund, I believe, that we specifically give to an organisation that works with young people in that community, as well as the Positive Futures Fund giving money to neurodivergent organisations that work in the community.
Excellent. That's also great. There's so much good stuff here. Obviously, we are a recommendations body, so it's always lovely to hear about all the great work that's happening, because it is. But definitely keen tonight to dig into some of this and hear your views on where we might be able to improve further, challenges and things that as a commission we can be recommending change around as well. So I've got some thoughts, but I'll throw it open to the group. So, Councillor Bentley.
Thank you very much. It's always good to hear things that create a positive future for young people. I think you just touched on it there. Something that has come up in some correspondence recently is around neurodivergent children and some of the extra needs that they have in playgrounds, often with kind of quiet times. I've heard, I'm hoping it was a one-off, where some parents were told to take their child home because the child was seen to be being disruptive. Apparently, it was the child was neurodivergent, and that was so quite an upsetting situation. So, how can, I guess, your team better support having times and spaces for families which have neurodivergent needs, and also make sure that the right level of staff training is provided, so that, because I think one of the things the hat that this Scrutiny Commission wears is also education. So we often hear that is a growing issue and the need for respite. So just thinking about that, and if you can enlighten us a bit more on what's being done.
If I first start off on the playgrounds and then possibly pass it training to my colleagues. So as you're probably aware, and it's being looked at through another commission, we are looking quite closely at our playgrounds in parks. And one of the challenges that we've been given is looking at how we make them more inclusive. So most of Southwick's playgrounds in parks, not all of them, but most of them are what I would call sort of at basic disability level. But there's much further we can go. So we can feed back the request to think about that better, about how we ensure that neurodivergence is supported in our playgrounds. We're putting a focus on, I can't remember which one it is, but there is a specific playground that we're going to try and take really, really far in the space of disability. So we could feed that into that one if it was appropriate. If not, we can look elsewhere. Now, clearly, we should be doing this across the piece, and it shouldn't, but we have to work within our means as well in terms of our capital investment. So very happy to take that specific request about neurodivergence and quiet space away and feed that into that other work stream. That would be very square. That's where we're looking at it. Thank you. And in terms of training for our teams on that neurodivergence.
Yeah, I mean, we do work quite closely with a couple of organisations. So we work with Neurodiversity Family Hub. We work with the Southwick Resource Centre team. So we do have training for our staff. I think it is an area that we know we need to do a bit more on. We also so we have an annual training plan, and that's one of the things that we are looking into doing some extra training on, because that's something that the staff have identified also in terms of what they would like to do more of. I think there is some challenges around the spaces within our buildings that we need to probably think about that in terms of some of them have got one room, so they're not quiet space, if you see what I mean. So where we have a building like Mid Street, we actually have a capacity to have an upstairs space where you could go and have some quiet chill time. Other than that, sometimes it's hard for a child to find space within a kind of busy environment. So that's a kind of capital, kind of fundamental issue. But we do have a lot of children using our services who have special educational needs and neurodiverse. I think it's probably, off the top of my head, probably a good 20-30% of our children. And we always ask on all our registrations sort of to identify children's needs, and we talk to every parent and carer about what that means. I think some of the challenges that we face is where children need sort of need more supervision. And so for us, where we only have 3 or 4 staff on site, that we would need to factor that into our staff to child ratios. And then that's where we need to have additionality of like extra personnel. And so we have been working with our colleagues in the council, in the 5 to 5, they were called that, sorry, they're not called that anymore, but in the resource team there to think about, are there any options about how we work closer with them and some of the schools, and thinking about that to bring more support into our playgrounds to enable all that. So it's kind of trying to use resources that are already there.
Sorry, just to add, in terms of spaces, for example, the refurbishment of the Brandon Youth Centre I spoke about earlier, that's one of the drivers at the moment. I don't know if any of you have ever been there, but it's just one big, massive open space. And the new design actually has various separate rooms with like glass, but they like soundproof, where people can go and have quiet time. So yeah, that's something that where we can, we try to factor in.
Very good. Yes. I just wanted to add in, not to give you recommendations, but I think one of the ways that we could do better, yes, Justine's spoken about working with children's services to make sure that we are trying to reach out to our schools and speak to young people and carers who have SEND needs. But I'm sure as counsellors, you understand when we go door knocking, we will hear from parents that say their children don't want to leave their phones, or some of them don't want to go to, some of them don't even want to come to youth clubs, or they don't want to go to certain spaces. So I think we need to do what we need to do within the youth services, working with the children's services and also working with the community safety team. Basically, any team that works with young people, we need to make sure that we're doing is they might be far and few between, but also they might not be. So that is what we're trying to do through the youth transformation work. where are the children with the SEND needs? Because not all of them go to our schools. Some of them go to schools in Lambeth, some of them go to schools in Lewisham. So where are they, and how can we meet them where they are at, as opposed to trying to get them into our spaces and adapt to those spaces when that's not even what they want. So I think we need to do some comprehensive study within the youth transformation program to make that better, because I absolutely agree there isn't much work being done on it at the moment, but that is our vision to do that in the youth transformation.
Yeah, that's great. And it reminds me of something that came up on the commission last year when we were looking at SEND and kind of employment. And a key factor was what is happening to our SEND children when they go into that world of employment. So yeah, there's a bit of a theme there, kind of like, where are they? What are they doing? How can we support them better? So it's great that you're considering that. Any other questions from the commission? If not, I've got a couple. Okay, Councillor Dean, you're up again.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for the reports, and thank you for the Budget Spark Sports Centre. It's incredibly popular. Yes. I have looked at the consultation section, and it does say 33% of youths are not aware of the location of the youth clubs. Is there a way you can reach out to more youth so they can make use of these services? Because you're doing a wonderful job. Thank you.
Yes, that is always a challenge. A couple of years ago, we launched the digital hub in response to young people telling us that they wanted one place where they could go and find out about everything going on in the borough. Obviously, social media is a big thing at the moment. That's where all young people get their information, their content, influences. So we have started playing around with social media channels. And one of the work streams we put for the DCMS funding is precisely to develop that much more and better, and make it something that young people will want to follow. The other thing the team have been doing is actually there's nothing better than really trying to build their relationships with the young people face to face, because sometimes it's not just about the place, but it's about, do they know the adults that are going to be there, the youth workers? Do they have a good working relationship? So the team have been trying, again, given the limited resources we have, but going to schools to do during break time, to try and do like mini youth work taster sessions, and try and start getting to know the young people in the local area who might not already be going to the youth centre. And to try and build those relationships and to attract a wider demographic of young people. And again, Justin might be able to tell you a bit more on that, but that's been working quite well. And we've put in another bid for external funding to allow us to expand on that work and do more of it, because it's been really well received. I don't know if you had anything.
Not a lot to that, but with this schools work, we've so far concentrated on secondary schools that are close to our youth centres, and we've seen an uptake. Sorry, about 14% of those children have kind of started to come to our youth centres. So we would definitely like to build on that and think about our kind of schools that are close to our adventure playgrounds, and really kind of pick up on that. So that's where we put in the bid for some additional funding to see if we can kind of reach out to. Reach 4 schools when I want to reach 13, but yeah.
Brilliant. I love the idea of going to them, and I think that's so brilliant, and a fact we often hear about at this commission and others, about that reach out and the communication between council and these key groups. I'm really pleased to hear that. I wanted to pick up on something that was said about the new funding that we're getting, this £500,000. And it sounded like there maybe could be a concern around delivering that by the deadline. Could you touch on why is that deadline there, and what steps is the council taking to make sure we do make the most of that money in the tight time frame we've got?
Well, I'll start off, but I'm sure colleagues might want to join in. So basically, the original timeline for delivery was by, and there was quite a lot of lobbying by local government, central government, whether that could be expanded. So the good news is that it was expanded. Having said that, yes, I did sort of suggest it was still quite a tight deadline, but what we've done is these people have got well ahead of the drag curve, having had conversations with council about the things that we could put in place prior to knowing that we were going to. And some of it, part of the biggest challenge is getting people into the delivery in a timely way, because clearly our teams are already engaged with delivering for young people. So, have looked at ways in which we can go well and in the way that the council needs, but in a fast track sort of manner. So that's one of the things that's being done, and it will just really on it and deliver. Also, to say that there were some quite clear criteria about what could and couldn't be within the programme. So a lot of it might feel like it's quite back office driven. So it won't be lots of programmes for our young people, but what it will do is will give us an even firmer foundation. And colleagues might want to say more about what it actually is, but a firmer foundation for our services going forward. So it's not about delivery in youth centres per se, although there will be some of that within the work that we're doing, but it's more about our system processes. That was an absolute requirement of the DCMS. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think even though it's going to be to an extent quite back office heavy, but within that we really want to make sure we take the opportunity to put again young people's voices at the heart of how we develop a new commissioning framework, the new ways we want to engage with young people. Part of the proposal is to bring in some young researchers that will help us shape all of those things. And really, the kind of legacy of the funding, we want it to be have a system that has a more, we do that already to an extent, but more of it and better. So the young people will have opportunities to directly, take part in the projects that we're going to be delivering. And the other thing is we also want to make sure that as much as possible we get our local youth BCS sector being a partner in delivering and shaping this as well. So that's, we made a very conscious decision to try and make sure that happens as well, which, might make it a little bit more challenging, but we think it's really going to be worthwhile putting that extra effort in.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. And actually, I'm impressed that the criteria allows you to invest in so much back office stuff and the systemic stuff, right? Because often with these kind of grants, that's just not the case. And so that could be really helpful for the long term. So I'm pleased to hear that. Yeah, I wonder if we should have a bit of a midpoint check-in review. It'd be great to hear halfway kind of how you're getting on. Yeah, just be really good to have you back in that period. Any other reflections or questions? No? Wow. What time is it? Gosh. I'm just having a look at my notes. Honestly, I think it's partly in testament to the amazing work that you're doing. It really is. So, yeah, it's all really good stuff. So thank you so much for the report. Thanks for coming. And unless you've got any closing comments, we'll look forward to having you back soon to discuss that funding. Yeah? Awesome. Thanks very much. Well, we are ahead of schedule, which I didn't expect. So on to agenda item 7, which is the Cabinet response to our scrutiny recommendations from last year, which is, yeah, really exciting. So I hope that everyone's had a chance to read them. I was pleased to see that the majority of recommendations are going to be taken forward. There were a few that were more in relation to antisocial behaviour, drug taking, crime, those sorts of things that were raised mostly by the East Street Market traders, and purely because we are not the Community Safety Commission, and those have not been taken forward. But it is very timely that at OSC, the Overview and Scrutiny Commission on Wednesday, we will be looking at the Community Safety Partnership. So I am keen to make sure that the recommendations we gave are heard there so that they can be raised by the proper forum. So I will commit to taking those to OSC on Wednesday and making sure they're mentioned. So there are 2 parts to the recommendations, of course. And last year we focused on 2 key areas. So those of you on the commission last year will remember we looked quite closely at the EHCP process, so education and healthcare plans, and SEND provision and inclusion in schools. And there were a lot of recommendations around those areas. And also, we did a review of the draft town centre action plan right at the start of the year. And that was a bit of a pre-scrutiny piece where we were able to feed into the development of that. Youth employment support, which had a link with SEND, and also the East Street Traders. I think we had them twice. Maybe the East Street Traders, we had them on twice. Yeah, so loads around that. I am going to take this as noted unless anyone wishes to discuss any of the recommendations or perhaps question any that aren't being taken forward. So we do have a right to, scrutiny happens all year round. We can go back to the cabinet and get more context around why they haven't been taken forward. So yeah, I'll give you all a minute or two to look through it. I know you've read it all in detail, so you don't need that, but yes, do let me know if there's anything you'd like to comment on. Okay. Excellent. Councillor Newens.
I was just going to ask, because obviously I wasn't on here, and I noticed that. And therefore I can confess that I haven't, read it in detail because it's not a piece of work that I was familiar with. But I did notice that there are some of the recommendations around SEND which are not accepted. Yeah. And I wondered how you, as the chair, and I don't know any other members who were on the commission last year, how you felt about that. I think some of those they've said that actually we're already doing this. Yeah. Which is kind of fair enough. But I don't know if you had sort of general concern about any of those particularly.
For me, no. I have more that I could say though. There's always a nuance to this. But Councillor Bentley I don't know if you had anything to comment on there.
I guess being as charitable as possible, we all understand that SEND vision across the country is, in full-blown crisis. So we're not alone. The scale of the problem is massive. I think what happened, it was last year, wasn't it, where we had some parents come and speak to us just about the absolute trauma that they are going through this, and that in many respects, the form filling, the support they're getting, it just takes too long, it's too slow, and their child is being set back, the impact that has on the family home. So I think that recognition of that human side of it, I think is really important. And I think there is one point there where it's kind of like, well, we can't offer one-to-one support, but it's like, we're not necessarily saying you need to offer one-to-one support, but what can you do that really makes this better? Because I don't know if anyone else remembers it, but it really was quite traumatizing listening, to what they were going through. And this, we heard from one lady who was a former head teacher, so she's not daft, she's familiar with the system, and she couldn't get the support her grandson needed. And I think particularly was hearing about it's the children in the middle. So you've got the ones where the issue is so severe that it's very easily apparent. You've got the ones who are maybe performing quite well because they're able to get on. It's that cohort in the middle people are really concerned about. And as Cass just said, that's an impact on your future workforce. We've got to get a grip of it. So I think that would be the one. Yes. And I don't know if anyone else has got anything sensible to add.
Yeah, Councillor Newman's come back. Yeah.
I'm using the fact that we obviously we've got a little bit of spare time, so maybe otherwise it'd be a frivolous thing. But I'm just very conscious as a school governor that this is obviously a major issue. And I would also say specifically, I'm governor of a school in my ward, which is, I think, it's the only infant school in the borough we have. And one of the problems that we face is that the infant school ends up doing a lot of work to get the EHCP, but then by the time the funding comes through, the child has already moved on to the junior school, and therefore, we do find. That I have no doubt at all that the school, everybody is doing absolutely everything they can, but it is particularly that delay in getting that conclusion and the funding coming through is really, really it's frustrating and also sometimes unmanageable.
Yeah, I think the topic was a tricky one because, like Councillor Bentley said, it's rare that anything we heard was totally unique to Southwark. And so to tackle this, it really is a kind of national systemic issue. And you know, we hear things in the media, don't we, about the work that is intended. It does seem that a lot of the responses are around statutory duty and actually legality, which is kind of interesting. And yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to get to grips with that really, because it is a shame that we put so much work into recommending some of these things, and actually it's just totally not possible.
It does seem like a massive national issue. Absolutely, because like I think Keir Starmer was on Laura Koonsberg, and he was saying that like the most amount of questions that he gets at Prime Minister's Question Time is about this SEND provisions, and just from across the country. So it really is like it needs to be a systemic solution. Otherwise, it's just going to be plasters over a gaping wound.
Yeah, and thank you. There is a white paper coming out in 2025 that will address a lot of this stuff. And I would hope a white paper, yay! I would hope that the cabinet won't just, that they will return to this document, because of course they can play a role in perhaps setting out the changes that need to be made from there. And yeah, I would like to go back to Councillor Ali just to perhaps make sure that they're taking these seriously, even if right now Southwark can't do a lot about some of them. And we can actually do it together at the Cabinet Member interview, which is in the next meeting. We haven't said it yet, but we'll set it. Thank you, Councillor Newens. I think that was a really helpful discussion and reflection point. Any other thoughts or reflections? No? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much for considering that report. That means we're moving on to the final item of the evening, which is the proposed work programme for 2025-26. And we have 3 upcoming meetings where we will look at that work programme. So next up is the 3rd of December, then the 2nd of March, and then the 2nd of February, and then the 4th of March. 2 quite close together in the late winter. And yeah, we are yet to schedule some more pieces. We didn't have Councillor Mwanganje come last year, I don't think. We mostly focused on SEN, so I think it will be really good to dig into that a little bit more. And there's various things we'd like to look at around post-16 offer, actually building on the work we did around SEND last year, similarly care leavers and the job opportunities, and so look for them, youth offending services, and lots more really around kind of work experience and employment opportunities, how we're working with Southwark Works. We hear about them all the time. The Good People partnerships. There's quite a few partnerships that often get mentioned that I think it would be good for us to dig into, as well as apprenticeships. And then we've all heard, I think, from Councillor Ali previously about the Keeping Education Strong strategy. We do keep returning to the topic of falling school roles, and I think it's important that we do. And the skills delivery plan under the current economic strategy, which I guess is coming to an end this year. So keen that we have a look at that and feed into how that's shaped going forward. We also have to do the cabinet member interviews. Make it sound like a chore. Obviously it is not, but we'll look forward to having Councillor Ali and Councillor Batterson along at some point. And discuss, I can't quite read your writing. I've got some things typed here, some things not. Oh yeah. Yeah. And I guess what you're saying there is there'll be the kind of main focuses. Yeah. So, okay, a good start in life under the 2030 goal that we have set from Councillor Ali, and a strong economy from Councillor Batson. I think what I'm learning from tonight is I probably need reading glasses, which is a horrible milestone to reach, but there we go. Right, so that's what's on our list. We can change it, we can add, we don't have to decide now. And of course, urgent things may pop up throughout the year. But does anyone have any comments or thoughts? Anything you would expect to see given what's going on in the world that's not there? Oh, Councillor Hussain, please use your microphone.
Sorry. Obviously, there's a big focus at the moment in terms of getting people back to work who are long-term unemployed, or people who are currently kind of suffering mental health challenges, who are on personal independence payment plans, etc. So, yeah, is there something that we could explore around that, and what sort of council can do in relation to kind of long-term unemployment and that sort of piece? I know obviously we've got apprenticeships there and work experience, so yeah, just that kind of, but that angle around the amount of people who are kind of on PIP or on kind of or long-term unemployed, how can we support them?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, it would fit quite neatly under employment opportunities. So yeah, good shout. Councillor Bentley.
Yeah, I was going to say we had Southwark Works, I think it was a couple of years ago, but I think they came, and also the kind of getting them back to work, but also support stay in work, those points. The other thing I was going to say, I know we've got, I met with a large my ward who said, oh, well, we've got all these vacancies and nobody's applying. And I said, well, why doesn't anybody know about them? And honestly, after about 30 minutes of hunting, I found them. I then tried to connect a young person for an apprenticeship. It turned out he couldn't do it because he didn't have a little bit of ID. And, it was just really, really challenging. So I do think there is a point there around the kind of youth employment. We've got all these young people who are neets. Why are they neat if there are jobs and they want to do a job? Because those lost years are challenging. Don't set them up for life. So examining that, and I'm happy to invite those people along to give evidence if they would like.
I like that. And just to be clear, are you sort of talking about the bureaucracy around it and kind of how they navigate it? So,
well, I mean,
is that the challenge?
I think that we live in this world where everybody can just Google things and find a job, and there's jobs out there. Well, it just seemed that actually was a hyper-local person who wanted a job, and there was a hyper-local job, and these two didn't know about each other and couldn't connect. So, is it the schools? Is it the council? Is it advertising? I don't know. And as I say, it didn't end up going anywhere anyway. So it was all a bit depressing tale.
Yeah, that's interesting. So why isn't that information getting to the right people so they can take those opportunities? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that probably leads on to kind of what I was thinking.
There is a queue, however, I will let you speak.
Thank you. Sorry. I'm not getting the getting the etiquette tonight, am I?
I'm grateful for the enthusiasm and the passion.
So yeah, so to that point, that's like that connectivity between local businesses, the council, colleges, schools, and it just doesn't like where's the connectivity, and what obviously I assume Southwark Works want to be that conduit, and they want to be that, but yeah, it seems like there can be improvements on that.
Oh my word, Councillor Bentley, and then we're going to Councillor Newens, who very courteously put her hand up about 5 minutes ago.
Just to respond to that a lot of these big developers are judged on their social value, and one of the social value KPIs is local jobs. So once again, it should be in their interest to be connecting people up. So I will now bow out and not say another word.
No, it's an interesting angle. Councillor Newens.
I was just going to add a reflection on this theme, so we're talking about NEAT, but actually, as as a parent of a very recent graduate, one thing that I am very conscious of is that getting graduate jobs is extremely difficult, and we're hearing on the news that graduate opportunities are down by 2/3. And as I say, very much seeing, I have two recent graduates living with me at the moment, and it's tough out there. It's tough out there, and I think, you know, sort of, yeah, we can focus on NEET, but actually these are the kids that are sort of need the jobs in order to avoid being in that position. So that's also something to weave in, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Some really good ideas there. Well, look, if anyone has any other thoughts. Oh, yes, Mana.
In terms of what you just mentioned about the graduate jobs, it's a bit difficult times. Especially you can find some jobs. I've met some people, they come across some jobs, but the criteria they're asking for makes it hard for them to get a job. Like for instance, they will say you need to have 2 years experience, 3 years experience, and that person has don't know anything. So it makes it's really impossible for them to apply for the job. Yeah. So if they can look something that they'll be able to incorporate them into the system, that will be much better.
Yeah, some way of developing them, or a middle step.
Yeah.
Or yeah, I like that. That's really helpful. Thank you. Well, as I say, keep in touch. Email myself, Amit, Councillor Bentley as Vice Chair, and in fact the Commission, if you've got any other thoughts or ideas. We've got a couple of months now till the next meeting, so we'll be planning it in that time. We do like to give officers at least a month to turn reports around, so please do get in touch by end of October, really at the latest, so we can get those requests in. So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for all of your contributions, and I'll see you on the 3rd of December. Bye.